Blog Talk Radio.
Yes, y'all. You are now listening to the sound of the shofar blowing. The shofar is a ram's horn that is blown to inspire the people to do their thing. And the shofar is blown to coordinate a queen or a king. And today the shofar is being blown to call us to become more aware that sex is life. This is Full Show Holistic Health on Blog Talk Radio, and I'm your host, Shophar, from Full Show Energy Work. And today my guest is Ria Yoshida. Ria is a sex coach. She helps people have extraordinary sex and more passionate love. So with that, let's bring the sister on. Ria, how you doing?
Wonderful. So good to be here.
Yeah, no questions. It's really good to have you here. I'm very happy that I came across your profile and I was able to reach out to you. I know from reading up on some of the your wisdom on your IG and stuff like that. I know that you have some stuff to impart to the family out there. So yeah, just looking forward to the conversation, looking present to the conversation.
Yes, same here. When I received your message and I went to your page, I felt immediate resonance. We're definitely cut from the same cloth.
Oh, man. All right. No question. Well, for those of you, the family, I see some of you tuned in here, and those of you through time and space who will tune in a little, quote-unquote, later, you know that I usually just go ahead and jump in. I will leave at the end some space for you, Ria, to tell people what you have going on and how people can connect with you. And then also people can get the backstory on how you came to be on the show right now. But as far as that goes, since time is of the essence here with everything, I want you to go ahead and let's go ahead and get into it. So can you tell us, why is sex is life? Why is sex so important in life? Like, for those of us out there, why do we need to acknowledge the importance of sex?
Beautiful question. One of my favorite questions, really. Well, it's so amazing that we are here. Like, it's a miracle that humanity exists to begin with. So just pulling the spectrum all the way out, bird's eye view, life is a miracle. How this even happened, right? So whether we come from like the Big Bang all the way through amoeba, all the way through all the evolutionary stages, it's a miracle that we're here. And part of our evolution has been through sex and sexuality. And sex is not just the science of, intercourse or, the sperm and the egg meets and, there's a fetus in the uterus. Like, it's not just that, but it's also that we're made of energy. We're more than just biology. We're a multifaceted being. And so sexuality is life force energy, in that for most of us, regardless of how we came about, for most of us, mom and dad had sex. We might not like to think about that, though, right? Because there's a lot of socialization on what's appropriate, what's inappropriate, especially around this subject. And so whether you were birthed through in vitro or through, science having a hand in it, which is beautiful and also quite divine. It's a different type of code. But for most of us, mom and dad had sex, and this is how we came about. Sexuality and the lack of sex-positive education in the world has really disconnected us from the source, from the origin of how we are as a humanity as a whole in our day-to-day life. And I know that, my sexual education in high school growing up was the most boring experience of my life. And it really takes a certain level of skill set on the educational department to have a group of teenagers sitting in a room and making health education, sex, the most boring experience to teenagers. That really takes something.
Right.
So I think re-educating ourselves, around sex and sexuality can only bring more life and life force energy into our knowledge.
I love that. I love everything you said there, as far as like the whole idea that you have these teenagers with hormones busting out, and yet somehow we make that banal and boring. Like you said, that is a special skill set to pull that off, and yet somehow they do it very well. And I think part of it, though, Ria, is that there is an acknowledgement of that we are more than just this biology. And at this turning point, that humanity is at this crossroads. I think that is really what we are. We even if we don't know it, we're looking to hear that message, and especially around sexuality. So that's why I really get down with what you're saying there.
Well, if there was fear before around sex, it was probably around STIs, sexually transmitted infections, or STDs, sexually transmitted diseases, or STVs, sexually transmitted viruses. So, there was a lot of fear around sex and sexuality before, whether it came from schools, teachers, peers, parents, religion. There's so many, the government, right? There's so many laws against how we show up with our bodies, what's allowed, what's not allowed. There's very, very strict rules and guidelines that are completely contradicting. So if we were afraid before, now in these times of, coronavirus, COVID-19, and quarantine, we're even more in a state of physical distancing. And so, if anything, the times now have taught us, perhaps it's that how connected we really, really are, and how much we take for granted, human connection and human touch. And so perhaps this can be a great win for humanity, even though it's really difficult and hard to get accustomed to change and to evolution. But wow, what a magnificent way that life is calling us to show up and step up. And, if any of these resonates, now is the time to really pay attention and to go inward and to truly listen to what's real. There's just too much, hype and media and propaganda that's going on, and especially around sexuality and sex. There's so much misinformation. Where do we actually go to learn? We're constantly taught what not to do. Don't do it unless you're married, unless you're monogamous, unless you're really in love, you get engaged. There's like all these rules, all these check boxes that we need to fulfill for us to have a sexual, romantic, thriving relationship. And yet we do all of it. We go behind closed doors. We keep it in private. And then it's as if the shame, the guilt, the doubt, the fear is going to just evaporate magically when you enter into this, mythical relationship behind this mythical closed door. And so I really want to invite the conversation that we're all clueless, really, to admit the complexity and the complicatedness of, what sex and how we get to relate with our bodies and how we get to relate with our lovers and each other really are.
I love it. Wow. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense what you're saying there. And I love what you're saying. What I get from what you're saying, too, is about self-sourcing. I know on your Instagram you talk about, having an inside job on, say, sexual security and these things. Based on what you were just saying there, I'd like to maybe go into that a little bit, because one thing that you said, too, that I love was that, all of us human beings are insecure. And so I'd love to hear you just go into that a little bit about, how is it that we're all insecure, and how does that show up in the bedroom or with sex and everything?
Brilliant. So good. So one of the reasons why we love sex and why we're so obsessed with orgasm, right, or climaxing, is, forgive my accent, but the French says le petit mort, so it means like the little death, right? And they're referring to orgasm as this moment where you have a couple of seconds of totally losing your sense of self. And in those couple of seconds, you can't think, You don't, you just feel total oneness, total connection. And total oneness and total connection to all of life is when you lose your sense of self. So, in psychology, we call it the ego. And that's also really popular now, the term ego in pop psychology, and it's probably all over Instagram. But the ego and the self is very, very insecure. And it's a fascinating, aspect to ourselves, because we need the ego, we need the sense of self, the personality that gets developed very intricately, through birth all the way through adult life and the rest of your life. We need it to survive, to face the world, to be out in the world, to interact with other humans. And it's ironic, or it's a paradox. We have to hold the complexity that it's both. We need this thing, and yet this thing is so insecure, because its sole purpose and its sole job is to constantly ask, who am I? How am I okay? How do I survive? Are you a friend? Are you a foe? Do you love me, or are you going to hurt me? Am I okay? Is it safe? Like, that's its job, is to be insecure. And yet when we really truly believe that that's the totality of who we are, then that will show up in the bedroom. And so it's about a question or a conversation around consciousness. Are we aware that we're multifaceted, that there's multiple layers to us, that we have this thing called the personality who wants to protect us, who has all these beautiful humor and quirkiness and characteristics that we get to play with other humans, with other people and their personalities. And when it comes to sex and sexuality, more intimate. It's a lot more vulnerable. You're peeling back the veil, so to speak, to allow someone into a more primal aspect of you. There's the animal, there's the body, there's the intelligence that really comes online, which I like to refer to as erotic intelligence. And then there's, you were referring to a form of spirituality. So whether, someone's an atheist or whatever their spiritual beliefs or practices are, God, goddess, universe, higher being, higher power, however you want to refer to it, what we all can agree on is that we are standing on this rock we call Earth, hurling through space, right? There's so much space. And we're technically made out of stardust. Miracle of life, this awe, this inspiration, and maybe like a word that we can all agree on is that we exist in this cosmos, that there's something cosmic that's bigger than us. Right. And in that awe of what's cosmic, we get to relax into feeling insignificant. And it can be really terrifying to feel unimportant. And yet, that is where freedom actually lies. And so, the post on Instagram that I was really referring to, security being an inside job, it's the security is allowing oneself to feel insignificant, to not be important, to really allow oneself to be totally connected to the other person. And that when we're making love or merging with another human being, it is the closest living experience, I believe, we have to feeling what it's like to be with God, to be with the divine, to totally let go and merge and melt into, what a lot of spiritual schools call oneness or consciousness. How does that land?
Right. That makes, total sense to me. I love everything you said there. Family, go back, listen to it, take it in, marinate on it, whatever. It's a lot of gems in there. I love what you're saying about the ego by nature, more or less is insecure. That is a quality of the nature, because the quality of the ego, as far as my inner and understanding, is that it is individuated. It is the belief or understanding that it is not one. For instance, if the Buddha was if someone was to come into moksha or to a place of deep nirvana or hotep, whatever you want to call it, of connection with source, and then we were to say the person's name, there would be no one there to answer. We need the ego to even have someone there to answer, right? So the nature of the ego is that it's going to be insecure because it's not secure in oneness by nature. So I love that. And then, but what you're saying though is that sex brings us back to a place of that even if it's just a glimpse, that remembrance of the ego not existing, which is a beautiful thing of melting into the other and becoming one. Very powerful, and I love that you have some practical applications of it. Like, for one thing, I saw in there that you were talking about, like, short men and your love for short men, and how society, or how women in society, sometimes you can place your sense of security as far as being secure in your own femininity on the man being tall, dark, and handsome, or vice versa, a man who loves women or whatever, but she has to be beautiful, or she has to look a certain way in order for him to feel secure in his masculinity. So let's talk a little bit about that, about insecurities, and get into a place of not leaning on them because of some of the insights that we come to through sex.
Yes, totally. We can be so harsh and so mean, not only to each other, but all of that when we project onto someone else. Like when women are complaining about, it is a form of violence and body shaming, because there's absolutely nothing that he can do about his height. On the other hand, what I hear a lot of men complaining about could be a woman being overweight, right? So her width. She's complaining about his vertical limitations or height, and he's complaining about her width and like how wide she's growing. And
right.
And it's unfortunate that this is all forms of body shame, and it's a form of self-hate that we're projecting onto the other. And so, I'm being very stereotypical and gendered in this, man versus woman. But, the battle of the sexes, it's real. And, something that I've heard is men give love to get sex, and women give sex to get love. And it's this backwards idea that we have of who the other gender, if you are heterosexual, needs to be, right? And so if we layer, is that it's representative of the feminine and the masculine. And those are energies. And the feminine and the masculine, the archetype, the reason why we call it that, like in language is limiting, right? But if we just think of it as two energies instead of it being a gender, it comes from the archetype of having mother and father. Because mother and father is what creates you, is what creates the baby. And so we think of the mother, the archetype of the divine mother holding the feminine, and we think of the archetype in the divine father holding the masculine. And these two energies live inside of you, the baby, the being that is you. So this is the blueprint, if you will, of what it means. If you've ever heard, hey, I have masculine and feminine aspects within me. Now, you might have a dominant energy and a more passive or secondary energy, and that's beautiful. And so even in, homosexual relationships, like I am very bisexual, and that's unique for me because I'm a feminine woman who is sexually and romantically attracted to other feminine women. And that is a whole nother conversation, perhaps. But I'm, very much attracted to romantically and sexually to masculine men. And so the insecurity is whenever we're disconnected from these lost aspects within ourselves. So whenever I am not fully realized in the totality of my femininity and my masculinity, I will go ahead and project that outside of myself in hopes of healing, because we're so brilliant, call it the subconscious, call it the unconscious. We're actually quite brilliant, in which we're constantly seeking equilibrium and health. And so we create drama and difficulties or challenges that pop up in our life that's mostly out of our control. And the way we relate to our challenges and difficulties is in an effort to find healing and transformation.
Right. Definitely. I love that. It's the wisdom of the oversoul, or that other part of ourself, of our being, that creates the people and even the events in our life that to help us grow and to help us to bring the other archetypes online. I remember reading a brother by the name of Raul Nefer Amin. He said that we meet with failure in life when we're not able to, bring on the other archetypes in life. So if we're a hot person and life is calling for us to be cool, if we don't bring those other archetypes online, we will meet with failure of sorts. Or even if we don't want to be as harsh as say failure, it may not be as the optimum, right? And so I love what you're saying there. And one of the key ways, Ria, that I've seen, like you're saying, that life helps us bring these different things online, other than just events, is our relating, our relating to one another, especially our intimate relating.
Oh, yes. The intimate relationships, like romantic, deep, partnership, sexual connection, it defies the laws of physics. It is a unique relationship to source, and it directs a mirror to inside, right? Because you really can't hide or lie in those relationships. And those relationships, like the romantic, sexual, deep relating, are ways that can circumvent our very, very clever survival codes. And the survival codes, or the ego, or the personality, whatever it is you want to refer to it, it's very clever. And it's about being just one sliver cleverer so that we can catch ourselves. And when we're in these, deep romantic relationships or partnerships, our partners can see our blind spots. And if anyone believes they don't have any blind spots, then that's the biggest blind spot of them all. But it's really about being a powerful creator, where we get to recruit and hire our partners to be like, you have the job to be like the most pristine mirror where I can really see my shit. Clean that up. Take radical responsibility in that. And when it's a sexual relationship, right, it's like you're both metaphorically and physically becoming naked in front of your partner.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about really, owning and acknowledging that you are a multifaceted being. You're so clever, you're so brilliant, you're so divine, you're so layered. There is nothing in life, I truly, truly, wholeheartedly believe, that is more fascinating and interesting than getting to know yourself. And we live in a world that really celebrates and honors freedom, right? Especially here in the U.S. It's like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, be free, land of the free, right? We really have this nationalism, if you will, about freedom, and yet don't be sexually free. Don't be a slut. It's like, don't overdo it. Oh, you watch porn, you're addicted. And yet it's like, don't be naked, no nipples on Facebook. Like, it's like, what? How can we be free beings if we're not, but we can only be free in certain aspects and not with our genitals or sexuality, right? And I don't mean it's like a free-for-all, but it's about how can we be ethical about it and still respectful, honoring consent, honoring each other's boundaries, and not have shame or guilt or doubt about the most sacred altar between your legs. It is an altar. Mm-hmm. It's really where we should all be praying.
Hit your knees and pray, people. Pray before the altar.
Yes.
Very cool. That's what's up. Well, Ria, always, it's amazing when good conversation and everything, the time goes by very quickly. So we are under 5 minutes already, and I definitely want to leave a space for you to let people know, like, what you have going on. We're in May 2020. We'll look back in the little time capsule or whatever, time machine, and look back at this time. And I don't know where we will be at or how we will look at this moment. It is a very unique moment that we find ourselves in. But anyway, that being said, May 2020, we're in a place of quarantine and stuff like that. So let us know what you got going on and, how people can connect with you, and maybe just give one last gem as you close out with the family here.
So good. So you can find me on Facebook and Instagram. On Facebook, it's like facebook.com/sexcoach Ria Yoshida, RIAYOSHIDA. And what quarantine has really done is it's birthed this new online course that I'm super excited about. It's called The Art of Sexting, Seduction During Quarantine. So it's virtual seduction. It's how can we keep sexual energy alive and juicy and well-connected virtually through the internet. And even beyond quarantine, this is probably a really, really good skill set to have. I also do 6-week, group coaching called Pussy Whisperer, Becoming the Ultimate Lover. So she's begging for more. And I love supporting people, going deep, uniquely one-on-one through coaching. And I'm happy to, create a boutique package for anyone who's interested, because we all have very unique stories and places we come from for deep trauma and deep healing to really happen. And, of course, my free offer is I have a Facebook group called Sex Made Simple. And so happy to share that link with your audience, and would love to support people on that platform. I give free exclusive content just in my sex book, my Sex Made. And I have some free offers like what sexual development stage are you? And there's 6 stages that I go really deep within the Facebook group for. I also have a freebie offer called What Every Man Needs to Know About Women. And it's a really deep one. I don't know if you've seen the video yet for it, but it's really exciting.
No, I have not seen that video, but I definitely like to check that out.
Yes. Basically, it's like I am shouting the female secrets from the rooftop so that men can really feel supported and celebrated for your sexual desire, for your urge. And also, obviously, women want sex too. And it's just that we might look similar, and we have more similarities than differences, and yet we're wired completely different. So I really want to be the bridge between the sexes so that we have an alliance instead of a battle.
I love it. Let's form a sexual alliance, people.
Yes.
especially like you say, sexy during the quarantine. Let's go ahead and start putting in the groundwork for that sexual alliance. Yes.
Especially
cool.
Now that we're in a post-Me Too era, we have the whole pickup artist scene where there was a lot of men, being pickup artists, and it's still very popular to this day. And following the pickup artist movement was the Me Too movement, #MeToo, where women have come together to tell their stories around sexual assault and violence. And so now we get to be in a new quarantine era where we get to really look at where have we been, what is going on here, and go into this, united cocooning of deep listening. And perhaps from this space of deep listening, we can learn new skills and ways of relating to our bodies and to each other that can really birth and give new life into how we want to show up. Who do we get to be to show up powerfully, liberated, especially in our sexuality?
I love it. United cocooning of deep listening. And with that, y'all, you've been listening to Ria Yoshida today. Thank you, sis, again for coming through and dropping some gems. It's up to the family. Y'all will praise them, but I can see the value, and I hope y'all do too. Thank you again, Ria, for coming through.
Thank you so much for having me, Shophar. It's been a pleasure.
For sure, no doubt. All right, y'all. Well, again, this, and family, just want to send out love and light to all of you. Appreciate y'all checking me out. Like I said, those of you on Vibe Now, and then those through time and space. Whenever and wherever you hear this, sending light and love out to you. And again, this is Faux Show Holistic Health on Blog Talk Radio, and I'm your host, Shophar, from Faux Show Energy Work. And y'all keep shining, keep climbing, y'all. Keep that S.E.X in your life. Keep shining, keep evolving, and do that exponentially. Peace.